Midnight in Amber, Skullduggery Chapter 1. Landers met up with Adric in the back of a seedy tavern. The priest curled his nose at the reek of the place, but sat down without laying back his hood. "Why," Adric muttered, "did you insist upon this rat-infested dunghill?" "Are you dressed as I asked?" was all he said. Adric lifted aside a fold of his cloak to show Landros that he was indeed not wearing his priestly robes. "These were damn difficult to come by, I might add," he growled. Barak came back to the table with a fistful of drinks and pushed one in Adric's direction. Landros took his mug and leaned over it as if nursing the foul drink. And it was foul. He looked down, was startled to see things of an unknown nature floating in it. He did not want to know what it had been watered down with. He made a minute gesture with his head towards a corner of the room, deliberately not looking in that direction. "You see the man in the dark grey cap?" Adric glanced over and saw the man in question. "Yes?" "Vanishti," Barak whispered into his mug. "He's one of those who disappeared while you were gone. He used to pal around with Ashanda." "Ashanda?" Adric asked, wide-eyed. "Was he with her when—" Landros shook his head shortly, warning Adric to lower his voice. "He disappeared at about that time. He turned up again 3 days ago and has been acting suspiciously ever since. I have reason to believe he was, and is still, in the grip of the enemy. I've been talking to him, and he is of the opinion," he added with distaste, "that we can be bought." Adric gave Landros a long, calculating look, one which did not make him comfortable at all. "Can we?" he asked quietly. Landros looked hard at him. "If the price is right," he said more loudly than he had been speaking. He leaned back to stare eye to eye with the grey-capped man, who grinned at him from behind the priest with a mouth missing quite a few teeth. "Your friend, yes?" he grinned. He was a dark man with short, tight, curly hair, a Northman obviously not used to the colder clime from how he was bundled. Landers shook his head and spoke as slowly and clearly as he could without being insulting. "No, missing one," he said, holding up a finger. "Not one?" he asked, grabbing Adric's shoulder. "Yes, one. Another one," Landros added. He ground his teeth. This man annoyed the hell out of him. He knew damned well that Vanishti played an elaborate charade at not understanding the southern tongue. The man did have trouble speaking, but understood 10 times more than he let on. The man was a foul-smelling snake, and he knew it. "Ah!" he exclaimed, making a great show of straightening Adric's cloak. So sorry. Is waiting over soon? Must go. No patience, these other men. No patience." There was a spark of genuine fear in his eyes at the mention of these others. As if on cue, Lithgoran lurched in like a drunken skunk with his arm around another young elf. He saw the group at their table, nudged his drinking partner, and pointed, slurring something in what Landros guessed was supposed to be Elven. Great, he thought. Either Lith is stinking drunk and absolutely useless, or he's putting on one hell of an act. He held his breath as he got a whiff of the pair. "I don't know who's going to be more surprised, me or the enemy," he added to himself. "Are you two sober enough to do business?" he growled. The pair stood straight as arrows, puffed out their chests stiffly. It was then that Landros noticed the striking resemblance between the two men. "Yes, sir, business, sir. Reporting for duty and all that," Lith saluted. Then the two suddenly bowled over with giggles, slapping at each other and calling for another round. Landros saw a gleam flash across Vanishti's eye and vanish. That these two were soft and drunk pleased him. It did not please Landros. He stood. "2 more," he said, pointing at them, "is all. We go now." "We go? Good. Yes, good. You keep brothers quiet. Scare off our friends. They make too much noise." "I got it," Landros said, pushing the 2 elves ahead of him and following the Northman out the door. "Landros!" Lith hiccuped, grabbing his brother in a headlock and showing him to his friend. "This is my brother Lithandrus. What the hell is your name again?" His brother laughed, belched, and pulled himself free. "Lithgoran, you dolt," he growled, still laughing as he staggered down the street. "No, I'm Lithgoran." "Ain't I?" "Landros," he bellowed. "Which one am I again?" Landros just walked on, trying to ignore the pair. He fell into step with Vanishti and growled just loud enough to be overheard. I'd slit their throats myself if I thought I could get away with it. I told him to come alone. Vanishti tried to be consoling. Is understanding, wanting family and on good fortune. Food gorchin? The brother piped, staggering up between the two. What's in it? Moraine? Women? He leered. Lots, friend, Vanishti said. You will see. Lots more. The man staggered back to his brother, and Vanishti turned back to Landros. Think we'll not be trouble. Big man in back can sit on too, yes? He chuckled with a broad grin. Lark entered the small shop, uncertain she had the right place. The dresses that hung on elaborate dummies all throughout the shop were of the finest materials, and certainly far too rich for her. Not to mention, not her style. Most of them had high collars that somehow left the necks open to the breast and tight, rigid waists with falls of cloth to the floor. None of them seemed practical in the least. She was admiring the rich, dark, wine-colored velvet of one of the dresses when the shopkeeper appeared. She was a small, round woman with a ruddy face and plenty of laugh wrinkles, and seemed to be losing a lot of weight quickly, as her skin hung a little loosely over her collar and cuffs. She gasped with delight on seeing Lark come in. Oh, please tell me I can do something for you, she chirped. You like that one? Lark, she said hesitantly, not sure quite what was expected. Was told to come to you? I'm Bianca Fitzwelm. The woman's face lit up suddenly. Oh, yes! Oh, my, she breathed. You are a lovely creature. He wasn't exaggerating. And such a tiny waist. Oh, however do you expect to carry a child in that tummy? We'll fatten up, she answered, not certain what to make of this woman. Mother had no trouble. Oh, of course not. Silly me. Listen to me chattering away like a magpie. Come in, dear girl. Oh, I've got just the thing for you. Your friend was most adamant, she began, taking her by the arm and leading her into the back of the shop. Nightingale shyly followed, not willing yet to be seen. In the back, he perched himself quietly on the top of the elaborate mirror and watched. Bianca had laid out several dresses and waded through piles of cloth and thread and half-made pieces to stand Lark on a small pedestal in front of a huge, expensive glass mirror. It's so crowded, Lark commented. Yes, well, not much business lately, you know. My last real commission was for Lady Elenath's wedding dress at the Spring Festival. She shook her head sadly. And then the war started. Such a shame. Very bad for business. And everything else. I know, Lark agreed. Now, she said, clapping her hands together, I spent all morning laying out some things that, from his description of you, would flatter you best. Your friend commissioned me for 4 dresses. She held up her hand as Lark started to protest. He was most adamant about it. Very specific, except for the design. Of course, which is up to you. 4, he said. 2 nice ones for performing, she said, ticking them off of her thick fingers. 1 for every day, and 1 for... Oh, yes, mucking about. Lark laughed. Mucking about? Nightingale chirruped his merriment. Yes, I do think our handsome elf has us quite pegged. Mucking about, indeed. Well, shall we get started then? Here, she held up a dress very similar to the ones on the dummies in the outer room. Lark shuddered at the very thought of putting on the stiff, glittering cloth next to her skin. Bianca held the dress up against her. Almost your color. But I think you need a simpler gown. Your complexion just doesn't lend itself for anything too busy or complicated. Lark let her breath out. Before the woman could reach for another of the stiff, uncomfortable dresses, she stepped off the pedestal and set a gentle hand on her shoulder. Please, can we talk before you fit? Find something suitable after? Why, certainly, my dear. Why? Her face suddenly fell. You don't like these, do you? It's not that I do not like them. It's beautiful, but it's not me. I am Romeri, not court flower. Lark gestured down at her well-patched skirt and nearly threadbare blouse and vest, which badly needed mending. These are kind of clothes for me. She made a broad gesture encompassing the beautiful gowns around her. While all are beautiful, would look stolen on me, out of place. I need something is me. Short skirts, she said, drawing an invisible line with her finger across her shin, and loose blouses with vests that cinch up soft but tight, or wide belts or sashes with tassels or bells. I see, she mused, began looking Lark over more carefully. Stand up on the pedestal, she ordered, walking slowly around her, scrutinizing her closely. What kind of work do you do? He said two were for entertaining. What kind of entertaining? I dance and fiddle. Sometimes sing, not often. What kind of dance? Lark took a breath and mimed out a few examples. Alluring, subtle, passionate, enticing, she uttered. Yes, I think we can work on this. How much of your leg do you tend to show? Lark blushed. Sometimes skirts fly up to lower thighs if enough cloth. I like more to hint than display, more powerful. The woman seemed to be assessing her without passing judgment on her occupation, as many higher-born ladies did. Bianca nodded. You like to tease, tempt without being tawdry. I think we can manage. Do you ever show off that taut little tummy of yours? Lark put her hand on the body part in question. I've never thought about. Well, you should, she said matter-of-factly. Here, hop down, she said, picking up a well-worn book and stylus. She scratched out a quick sketch of a two-piece dress that was at once daring and modest. The waist was low across the hips with a broad belt, and the blouse was a snug little thing that hugged the breast, ending high across the ribs, and had full, billowy sleeves. How's that? It's beautiful, she gasped. It was strikingly similar to what she had conjured for her dance in the wood for Landros, something she had seen in rare storybooks in the north. Good. Let's find some material. She set the sketchbook down and began bustling about looking for fabrics. Lark glanced over her shoulder at Nightingale, who shared her growing excitement. Here, the woman laid a drape of sapphire blue silk across Lark's shoulder and looked up at it in the mirror. This will do for a nice start. Yes, she murmured, either ignoring or just not noticing the bird perched on the top of the heavy frame. How about this for the bodice and skirt? I'll have to line the bodice or you'll show everything the goddess gave you right through it. And this, she added, lifting Lark's arm out to the side and draping a length of sheer, starlight cloth over it. Lark took the corner of it in hand and turned, marveling at how it flowed through the air and across her body. Lark loved it and found the color very striking against her skin. Bianca took in her expression of delight and smiled. Yes, that's it, I think. She took the cloth and set it aside. Do you have any reds? Yes, she nodded. He said you were partial to reds. I think some wines I have would go very well on you, though I would stay away from roses and pinks. You haven't the complexion for them. If you wear any shade of red, it has to be deep. But I agree with your elven friend, though. You look good in blue. I almost wish you had worn that blue dress today. I would have loved to see it worn. Blue dress? Lark asked, looking up in surprise from the sketch. You know about... The drowned dressmaker laughed. Yes, I know about that dress. I made it. I always liked it, though it was too short for most of my usual clients. A real shame, though. I did wonders with what little of that cloth I had. Often thought about adding a contrast piece to the bottom to make it long enough, but I've always been glad that I hadn't. My husband told me he sold it to the same gentleman who commissioned these. I couldn't help but assume. She shrugged with a grin and returned to digging for the right material. It's lovely, Lark smiled. Looks good on me. On the floor, in a pile beneath a chair, Lark spied a piece of golden yellow silk. She got off the pedestal and pulled it out. It was not very big, maybe a yard long and only 4 inches wide at its narrowest point, and 9 or so at the widest. With it, she found other scraps of bright cloth of all kinds, brocades, silks, and bright printed calicos. Oh, these are nice, she said. Bianca turned and saw Lark on the floor with her scraps all spread out on her lap and around her. Oh, my, those are just my scraps, dear. Nothing they're big enough to do anything with, but I never really have the heart to throw out any of it. I've been making quilts out of the stuff. Oh, a rong is big enough, Lark smiled. How about motley from this? Skirt? She asked, fingering the gold silk longingly. A skirt? She asked, blinking. But none of that matches. "Oh, a motley!" she exclaimed excitedly, getting the idea. She sat down on the edge of the pedestal and began laying certain pieces beside each other. "I must say, this would be a very striking skirt." "Sasha, for every day, or mucking about," Lark laughed. "Yes. There, let's see. See if you can find me another piece of this one," she said, holding up a floral brocade. Lark found one and handed it to her. Yes, she mused. "Just out of curiosity," he didn't have much time to chat, he said, the poor dear. "Why are you in sudden need of so many clothes? Most just buy them one dress at a time as they need them. Or is he just feeling sorry for my old man and me and courting you in the same measure?" She grinned. Lark started to say something, but it got caught in her throat. Courting, she thought. Was that what this was? "Oh, he has just bad luck for romantic clothes," she managed, trying to laugh. "Was robbed after hurricane. Not being home, neighbors cleaned out anything not nailed in." "Oh, that's too bad," she said, getting to her feet. "Here, I think I have just the cloth to make a vest to go with this." Lark watched the woman disappear into yet another room and wondered how she could possibly have more fabric stashed away anywhere. Nightingale landed in her lap, admiring a piece of black silk shot with copper, gold, and silver thread. Courting, she thought again. For some reason, the thought evoked a mixed reaction. Part of her was absolutely thrilled, but another part felt a surge of fear. A fear of being caged. A fear of what the old woman had said to her about genteel witches. And a fear that not only was that what was happening, but that it was just what she wanted to happen. No matter what the consequences. These dark, confusing thoughts were quickly crowded from her mind as the dressmaker returned with an armload of measuring tape, pins, scissors, and a deep red velvet. Landris just walked on, brooding. He hated this part of town. It smelled evil. Of rotting vegetation and choking weeds, decomposing fish guts and alcohol, blood and every vice a man could dream up. It could all be found down here in the Bayside. Harlots hung their heavy, almost bare breasts out their second-story windows, calling down to the streets for paying company. Shadows lurked in places they shouldn't, and beggars could not be trusted to be just beggars. Their guide suddenly led them down a narrow side street. They followed. The buildings seemed to press down on them, closing them in. Even the drunken brothers fell strangely quiet, looking around them with glazed eyes. Landris kept his on Vanishti, not trusting the man's suddenly more furtive behavior, the jumpiness he displayed. The alley ended abruptly in a high stone wall, and 4 well-armed men backing a tall individual wearing a hooded cloak, which cast the face in shadow. "Welcome," the hooded one intoned. The voice was silky, husky, androgynous. "What's the—" exclaimed Lith's brother from behind them. Landris turned, saw 4 mounds of trash and rag rise up to become 4 husky men in leathers blocking them in. Landris grabbed Vanishti by the shirt front. "What is the meaning of this?" he snarled, drawing his sword. "Patience, my friend," soothed the hooded one. Landris turned, behaving like the rabid animal he had already established himself as being. "I am not your friend." "I would hope we are all friends here. Please restrain yourself and let us talk. My friends behind you are merely there to protect our conversation's privacy." Landris waited a long moment before he let go of the Northman. "There, good. Now we can do business, I hope?" "What sort of business?" Adric asked. "We represent parties who are not pleased with the current government in control of the city." "Ah," thought Landros, "here it is." "You mean the enemy?" Lithgorin asked in an innocent, drunken shock. The hooded figure laughed softly, almost feminine. "No, not who you think. I'm referring to the enemy within the city walls. Our leaders. Do you know that the leader of the enemy forces first sent a warning ahead? Informed our precious Lord Mayor of their intentions, and that a peaceful surrender was the only option aside from a massive and unnecessary slaughter. Were we, the citizens of this fair city, or even our ruling interests, the guilds of seamen and merchants and craftsmen, given the opportunity to voice our opinions? No. The Lord Mayor started this war, not the enemy at the gate, out of some sick loyalty to a king who could care less. The Merchants Guild. Could the enemy be there? Landros asked himself. Possible. It made some sense. Maybe the king does not know our situation, our desperation, he offered. Yeah, Lith and his brother chorus. Depreciation. The figure laughed again, deeper. Tell me, how could he not know? Landros stifled a growl. The question bit deep. Oh, calm yourself. We mean the king no ill will. We just feel that we are too far away for him to properly protect us or rule us. Why us? Barak asked slowly. Vanishti has been asked to find fine, helpful individuals such as yourselves, people with concern for this city and the people in it. Landros gave a snort at that. This city will fall. There is no question of that. You have no idea what the odds are against us, what lies outside those walls, or to what lengths they will go to capture the city. We are giving you an opportunity to have a hand in saving this city and line your pockets as well. What exactly do you want from us? Adric asked. What will our cooperation entail, and how much is it worth? We are not asking you to turn against the city in any way, only that, well, you not hinder the activities of those trying to save it from itself. The level of activity will, of course, dictate the level of the reward. If you are more the active than the inactive type, we can accommodate you easily enough. So what do you say? Have we a deal? I think, Landros began slowly, glancing at each of his companions, that you can rot in hell. Before Landros could lunge, Vanishti grabbed his arm and pressed himself so close against him that he could smell his last meal. You don't understand, my friend. Lives are at stake, yes? He leaned closer, lowered his voice. You see the man in the back with double axe? Yes, he alone, by himself. I watch kill a Shanda. No help, just the Shanda in he. You understand, yes? Take his money, take his promise. Keep your lives. Landros pushed him away in disgust. You sold her out, you son of a bitch, he yelled. The man came at him again with a look of horror. No, not sold out, sold for. Loved her. Was too late. Landros swung at him with his sword as he made another grab for him, the blade catching Vanishti across the face. Behind him, Lithgor and his brother sprang to life, drawing their swords, no longer playing the ineffective drunks, and fell into place to cover the rear. Landros wanted the cloaked figure badly, but had the wisdom to remain where he was to protect Adric. The cloaked figure simply raised a hand. Kill them. And this time be more careful where you get rid of them. With that, they turned, stepped sideways, and simply vanished. The defenders were surrounded, pressed themselves into a protective circle with Adric in the center, where he might be most useful and best protected. The 8 men closed in quickly. The fight was a maddened tangle, 2 on 2 with the priest caught in the center of the press. Lith took a glancing blow to his head, throwing off his own attack. His brother, likewise, danced out of the way of an arm shot, parried a second, and missing with his own. The other 4 mercenaries closed, 2 on Landros, the big one with the axe and the smaller man going for Barak. Landros found his blows mostly parried, barely managing to counter incoming strikes. One swing clipped his ear uncomfortably close, striking him mostly with the flat, but effectively blocking his companion's attack. Landros struck from below both arms, managing a nasty gash in the leg. Barak ignored the little guy beside him, concentrating on the giant with the axe. The double-headed blade swung downward towards his head, and he brought up his sword to block it, catching the handle just below the blade. He felt the impact of an ineffective strike across his mailed stomach. He threw off his opponent's attack and caught him on the backstroke, inflicting only minimal damage through his armor. Adric, busily gathering his mystic energies, loosed an eldritch bolt of energy at the smaller man confronting Barak, throwing him back and out of the fight, stunned. Lithgoran and his brother were battling in tandem without much success, neither taking nor dealing damage. They landed several ineffective strikes, glancing off of armor. Landros was holding his own for the time being, and Barak and the axe-wielding fighter dodged each other's blows. Landris was caught in the shoulder on the downswing by his second opponent as he was parrying the first. The blade bit through the leather into the shoulder at his neck and tore downward across his left arm. He turned, stabbing the second man through the gut, and used his speared weight as a balance point to kick the first man back, buying himself time to free his blade. There was a sudden crack-clatter as the axe broke Barrick's sword and left his arm hanging numb at his side. Barrick dodged the second incoming blow and, lowering his head, plowed him in the gut with a roar. Behind him, Lithgoran's brother took a slash to the head, opening him up for his other opponent, who dealt him a blow that opened him up from left hip to right shoulder. He fell back against Adric, who turned, caught him with his left arm as he leveled his crossed fingers at the pair now confronting him, and released a bolt of forked lightning that threw one of them off his feet and into the trash he had previously hidden in, and made the other stagger. Lithgoran saw his brother go down but was unable to do anything, having his hands full with a wounded leg and 2 men on him. Barak howled with pain as the axe struck him again in his right arm, just as the feeling was beginning to return in dirks and daggers. He struck out with his fist, the only weapon he had left, and made a solid connection with a cloth-covered breastplate. Landros fought blindly on, lashing out in an almost berserker fury. He parried a blow, narrowly missing his unprotected thigh, and threw his entire weight and strength into the upswing. He caught the man just under the edge of his leather breastplate and tore clean through the rib cage. He did not even scream as he fell, showering Landros in hot blood. He turned to help Barrick. The man still standing from Adric's lightning was not happy. Seeing the hand come up a second time, he charged, pressing in over the brother's body and striking the priest in his arm, forcing him to let go. A second swing cut into his leg, carrying through to hit Lithgoran full in the back. Adric went to his knees, eyes closed, praying for a miracle, for some intervention of maiden or matron to save their lives, and thus the lives of others who would follow their path, and no doubt be killed by these unjust men. His medallion began to glow in response, and clutching it in his bloodied hand, he prayed for a spell. Any spell. Opened himself to whatever was coming. Landros felt a strange prickling, and an unexplained wave of vertigo washed over him. His sword passed through the body of the man with the axe, not touching him. Landros saw the look of surprise on the man's face as his own weapon, which would have cleaved Barrick's head like a melon, bit deeply into the ground instead. Before Landros could say or do anything else, solidity returned, and they were elsewhere. "What the hell's?" he growled, looking around. They were in another alley, or another part of an alley, just as dirty and rat-infested as the first, but they were alone. Not far away, they could hear the surprised curses of their attackers. Landros looked down at Adric, still sitting with Lithgoran's unconscious brother in his lap. The priest had a look of absolute shock on his face. "Adric," Landros said, nudging him with his knee, reluctant to lower his sword for an instant. "Snap out of it! What happened?" I think," he stammered. "I think I just entered a higher circle," he gasped. Barrick bent down and, grabbing the brother's hand with his good one, pulled him onto his right shoulder, ignoring the discomfort. "Let's get while the getting's good," he said in a low voice. "Shouldn't take 'em long to start looking, and it don't sound like we went far." Adric snapped out of his shock and stood up. He dangled his medallion in front of his face, closing his eyes a moment as he mumbled a minor prayer. The medallion spun, pointing further down an alley behind them. Adric opened his eyes, pointed in that direction. "That way," he said. He then turned to face the opposite direction and erected the illusion of a dead end to stall their pursuers, and followed his companions as quickly as he could with his wounded leg.